kiss my ass if you don't like me. I got everything that I need. Got my boots stained red with clay. Built this life my own damn way. I don't break, I don't fold. I've been the same since 10 years old. Working hard, don't ask for favors. Ain't got time for weak behavior. I'm built from blood, sweat, and pain. Sunshine, thunder, wind, and rain. Stand my ground, don't tread on me. I'm free as a man can be. Ain't got much but what I earned. Every scar's another turn. Ain't afraid of what might be. You can kiss my ass if you don't like me. Time don't stop, it just flies on by. You blink once and years go by. Ain't no use in wasting breath, chasing things that don't bring rest. I count my days by work well done, by setting goals and seeing them run. Ain't no promise past tonight, so I live it hard and live it right. I'm built from blood, sweat, and pain. Sunshine, thunder, wind, and rain. Stand my ground, don't tread on me. I'm free as a man can be. Ain't got much but what I earned. Every scar's another turn. Ain't afraid of what might be. You can kiss my ass if you don't like me. I've been broke, I've been blessed. I felt that lightning in my chest. Some folks hate, some folks doubt. I keep on walking from here on out. I'm built from blood, sweat, and pain. Sunshine, thunder, wind, and rain. Stand my ground, don't tread on me. I'm free as a man can be. Ain't got much but what I earned. Every scar's another turn. Ain't afraid of what might be. You can kiss my ass if you don't like me.
Yes, yes, that's Kiss My Ass If You Don't Like Me by Kane Walker. Okay? That goes without saying. Anyway, good morning. It's Monica, your friend Monica. We are going to be continuing with our reading today of Dr. Michael Parenti on a book that we're reading, which is Black Shirts and Reds. And we want to pick up on chapter 2 of that book. Yeah, that's what we're gonna be doing today. Although I wanted to do another section of Dr. Rodney, how Europe underdeveloped Africa yesterday, but I got caught up with family matters, so I didn't make time for it. But I'll make time for it today, because that's too important. And I just want to send a shout out to Maya for liking my videos. And I really like that a lot, because that's why I do these videos, for young people, to inspire them to read books, to be optimistic, to be courageous, to love humanity, not to be dogmatic, to question fundamental foregone conclusion on things. That's why I do these videos, okay? I just want at least less dogmatic world, a more kind and loving world. I would like it. That's why I do these videos. So that's that. But anyway, before we do, I just want to say a few things. First thing is, I saw a tweet by Dr. Morandi this morning. It looks like United Snakes, these white degenerates, are gonna go forward with Iran, with the war with Iran. All right. It looks like that's what these degenerates gonna go with. So that's that. And then I want to read a tweet today by by Mr. Alan Mozahi, and that's somebody I cite a lot on my videos because I just find his comments instructive and helpful. He was an Israeli guy, and he left Israel because Israel is a piece of shit. It's just a piece of shit. Okay, it's a settler colony, a genocide, a piece of garbage. Okay, so he left. He said, "I'm out of here." Because if you have morals and you live in Israel, you should just pack your bags and leave because you're settler. Okay, and it's an act of genocide and extermination of the indigenous people for you. You piece of garbage, you think you deserve to stay there while they remove the indigenous people of the land. It tells you how shameless white folks are, okay? The garbage that come from Russia, garbage that come from Ukraine, garbage that come from Poland, garbage that come from all European places. It's disgusting, all right? But anyway, I'm going to read what Mr. Allen said. First of all, he was responding to a tweet from this gentleman named Harley Lund. And this is Mr. Allen said, quote, "Fuck you, Trump. Greetings from the Danish infantry group that helped the U.S. in the war in Iraq in 2003 without having a legal UN mandate. Personally, I am currently ill and out of the labor market due to PTSD." And then he showed a picture of himself with a bunch of other U.S. so-called soldiers, right? These are predators. Okay, U.S. military is a predator military because it's an offensive military that only go to steal, kill, and plunder the whole planet. Okay, it's not like you're here and you have an invading army coming here and you're defending your homeland. No, that's not what happened here. These degenerates are predators, okay? But he was one of them, okay? And he's suffering from the PTSD, he said. And I'm not gonna pontificate any more than that, right? I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna go to Mr. Allen, and he responded to Mr. Lung here. And this is what Mr. Allen said, quote, "White supremacy and colonialism so deeply internalized, they became transparent. These guys show a picture of himself and soldiers, friends, and an Iraqi home they were never invited into. We can only guess what horrors befell his legal owners. To make a point about U.S. being unfriendly to invading Greenland, white societies need to re-educate their throat very thoroughly," close quote. Okay, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people that they think like the Iraqis are less inferior than the Danish people, right? All right. So because now U.S. Trump now trying to go and by the way conquer a land that doesn't belong to Denmark, they're colonizers there. And now that he's saying fuck Trump because now it's it's just like we saw with Ukraine. When blonde hair, blue eyes, people start coming death and worse, they act like, oh, no, they're dying and worse. And you know, weapons dropping bomb on housings and shit. That's reserved for brown and black folks. But when it comes to pale skin and degenerates, no, we can't have that. Right? That's what it is. So, Mr. Allen, this is what we're dealing with. We have humans, these so-called human white folks who have internalized something so vile, okay? Like assuming that you were right on doing this shit to Iraqis, but not to the white folks in Europe. It's disgusting. All right. So that's what I wanted to say. But then going back to my own personal thing here in this house. So yesterday I give an update here on my video about Jean that she was doing good, and because we got a tweet, I mean not a tweet. See, tweets constantly in my head. Okay, that's what I do. I tweet. We got a text message from Chris, the permanent attorney, that Jean did remove her tube, and she's doing good. She cannot text people. I checked my text message. I didn't get no text message even though I text her, and I mean, so that, and then she communicated to my husband that Jean, before she went to the ICU, she said that she didn't want to see me in the ICU unit. Alright, and then I communicated the fact that my husband does not believe Chris, and I said that I believe her. Okay, alright, so that's what happened. And then I did my video, posted my video, and you know, do my regular routines here. And when I went downstairs, David told me that she got a text message from Chris again. Oh, okay. So what happened is, after that text, I didn't know nothing else that happened. But apparently, David texted Chris, saying that she's glad that Jean is doing good and that she doesn't believe her. And then Chris, instead of responding to David, he blamed me as if I'm the one who sent a text message, but which I did not. I did not send a text message. And then she saying to threaten us with a good time, saying that she's gonna block David and all that stuff. Anyway, so that happened, and it's just ridiculous and pathetic. I just like whatever, right? Nothing. So this morning when I got up, I was like, I checked my phone again. I didn't see. It looked like it was delivered, but it don't look like she read it or anything like that. My Jean did not read it. So I told David, I said, well, we were communicated by Chris that Jean was testing everybody, right? So why she did not test David, right? So she didn't test me, but in response to me, she ignored me. But so I told David, well, why don't you reach out? So David tested Jean, saying that, you know, whatever she said. I think she said something to the effect that, you know, he's happy that she's doing good and she loves her, right? And then Jean texts back and saying that something to like, oh, that she loved him too, and then he hoped that we can work things out. First of all, there's nothing to work out. We didn't do anything. I mean, I knew that Jean probably said that because she's a white woman. Okay, simple as that. I don't know what any other sanitized language or any other way you can say this. I know funny people when I see them. I mean, when women, they excel at passive aggressive. You know, I had a little hope that she will, you know, have a little bit of respect for her son, right? You know, but you know, I mean, they're just, I think it's just like, why do you think white supremacists keep going? White supremacy, the person that keep the white supremacy going is white women. because the bitch is the one who's raised children. The bitch is in charge of a very important thing. White man can keep the shit up without the bitch, okay? So I don't really know how this works. But what I do want to say is I have a little bit of respect for what's the name? For Grace, because she took her head, right? She had to have my ear. She got the ear from me. She could have said, she said that she didn't want me to go, but she didn't. Out of some sort of dignity and respect that she wanted to preserve for the whole thing, right? Trying to execute her mother's wishes, which I knew. Now David is still on the fence whether she believes Jean or not, but I believe Chris, and I said that yesterday, and I'll say that again. Even though she thinks that whatever she can, I don't care what she thinks. I do think that I have a little bit respect for her because she took her head, right? She took her head, even though that wasn't her cause. That's what I wanted to know on the what ground. I was asking questions. Why can I not go? Because it didn't make sense to me, based on logic, right? So that's that. Alright, that's just that. That's just how it goes down. But I had a discussion with David. David knows that I can. I don't know how they were together. It's just that's simple. You don't want to see me. You really don't want to see David. It's just simple. That simple, because we are a couple. We don't live separate lives. Maybe it's very difficult for white folks to understand how you don't have to like people, but you do have to respect them and learn boundaries. It's like they have a problem with boundaries. That's why they're settlers. They intrude, colonize, dominate, occupy, right? It's like boundaries are a problem, right? They don't understand when the line starts and ends, right? You think my daughter, I have 4 daughters. They all have boyfriends, except one daughter now who doesn't have anybody right now. I treat them all with utmost respect. I can say, hey, Pilarina, you can't bring Bradley around. No, because if I do that, I'm hurting my daughter. Not really Bradley, because Bradley is related to me through her. I'm hurting my daughter because it's fun. The love is fundamental human. It's not good to have. It's necessary. All right? Because I love my daughter. I respect my daughter. And she's an adult. Right? Even if I don't like Bradley, which I do adore him. Right? Same thing with Isabella. She's with Finn. Right? Same thing with Yasmin's boyfriend, Mika, right? He plays some music in the car and I don't like it, whatever. I complain a little bit, but within respect, right? I'm not gonna say I'm critically ill and probably it's just stressful for my kid and that they can't have the support they may need or deserve. All right, it tells you how internalized shit is going on. Okay, and they have to work it out, and they just don't like it. Unlike them who phony and passive aggressive, I'm not like that, and I'm not gonna try and start. Okay, They can go jump in the lake for all I care. But anyway, that's it. Now we can go to Dr. Parenti. So yesterday, we picked up on chapter 2. On chapter 2, I think I closed my page. Dr. Parenti is so awesome. But anyway, so the chapter 2, let us know praise revolution. For most of the century, U.S. foreign policy has been devoted to the suppression of revolutionary government and radical movement around the world. The turn of the 20th century found the McKinley administration in a world of attrition against the peoples of the Philippines lasting from 1898 to 1902, with pockets of resistance continuing for years afterwards. In that conflict, U.S. forces slaughtered some 200,000 Filipinos, women, men, and children. At about the same time, in conjunction with various European colonist powers, the United States invaded China to help suppress the Boxer Rebellion at its substantial loss of life to the Chinese rebels. U.S. forces took over Hawaii, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Guam, and in the following decades invaded Mexico, Soviet Russia, Nicaragua, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, and other countries across the usual inflicted serious losses upon the population of those countries. Did y'all keep track how the United States, the settlers, what they did to all these humans? And now they basically the people come here in the stolen land when they out there fucking with people. I hope y'all kept track with what Dr. Parenti just told us there. But let's keep going. The cause of counter-revolution. From the grade school through the grade school, few of us are taught anything about these events except to be told that U.S. forces must intervene in this or that country in order to protect U.S. interests through aggression and defend our national security. U.S. leaders fashioned other convenient rationales for their interventions abroad. The public was told that the people of various countries were in need of our civilizing guidance and desires the blessing of democracy, peace, and prosperity. To accomplish this, of course, it might be necessary to kill off considerable numbers of the more recalcitrant among them. Such were the measures our policymakers were willing to pursue in order to uplift lesser peoples. The emergence of major communist powers like the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China lend another dimension to U.S. global counter-revolutionary policy. The communists were depicted as evil, incarnated, demonized conspirators who sought power for power's sake. The United States had to be everywhere to counteract this spreading quote-unquote cancer, we were told. In the name of democracy, U.S. leaders waged a merciless war against the revolutionary in Indochina for the better part of the 20 years. They dropped many times more tons of explosives in Vietnam than were used throughout the World War II by combatants combined. Testifying before a congressional committee, former CIA Director William Colby admitted that under the direction U.S. forces and the South Vietnam collaborators carried out the selective assassination of 24,000 Vietnamese dissidents in what was known as the Phoenix Program. His associate, the South Vietnamese Minister of Information, maintains that 40,000 was a more accurate estimate. U.S. policymakers and the media kind of mouthpieces judge the war as quote-unquote a mistake because the Vietnamese proved incapable of being properly instructed by the B-52 bombers raid and death squad. By prevailing against this onslaught, the Vietnam supposedly demonstrate that they were, quote, unprepared for our democratic institution, close quote. In pursuit of counter-revolution and in the name of freedom, U.S. forces or U.S. supposed surrogate forces slaughtered 2 million North Koreans in a 3-year war. You hear that? 2 million North Koreans, U.S. surrogates forces slaughtered 2 million North Koreans in a 3-year war. 3 million Vietnamese, over 500,000 in aerial war over the Laos and Cambodia, over 150 million in Angola, over 1 million in Mozambique, over 500,000 in Afghanistan, over 500 to 1 million in Indonesia, or 200,000 in East Timor, 100,000 in Nicaragua. Combine the Somoza and the Reagan eras, over 100,000 in Guatemala, plus an additional 40,000 disappeared, over 70,000 in Iraq, over 60,000 in El Salvador, 30,000 in the dirty war of Argentina through the government amidst to only 9,000, and 35,000 in Taiwan when the Kuomintang military arrived from China. 200,000 in Chile, and many thousand in Haiti, Panama, Grenada, Brazil, South Africa, Western Sahara, Zaire, Turkey, and a dozen other countries in what amounts to a free market world holocaust. Official sources either deny these U.S.-sponsored mass murders or justify them as necessary measures that had to be taken against an implacable communist foe. Anti-communist propaganda saturate our airways, schools, and political discourse, dissipate repeated and often fictitious reference to the tyranny of the red menace. The anti-communist opinion markers never spell out what communists actually did in the way of social economic policy. This might explain why, despite decades of red bashing propaganda in most America, including many who number themselves among the political cognoscenti, still cannot offer informed statements about the social policies of communist society. The anti-red propagandists ordinary words about how revolutionaries in Russia, China, Cuba, Vietnam, Nicaragua, and other countries nationalized the land held by rich exploitative landlords and initiated mass programs for education, health, housing, and jobs. Not world about how the efforts advance the living standards and life chances of hundreds of millions in countries that have long suffered under the yokes of feudal oppression and Western colonial pillage. An improvement in mass well-being never before witnessed in history. No matter that, the revolutionaries in various Asian, African, and Latin American countries enjoy popular support and were willing to pursue a neutral discourse and East-West relation rather than place themselves under the hegemony of either Moscow or Peking. They still were target for a counter-revolutionary battering from opposing communists because they might be revolutionary. It was a short step to opposing revolutionaries because they might be communists. The real sin of revolutionaries, communists or not, was that they championed the laboring classes against the wealthy few. They advocate changes in the distribution of class power and the way wealth was produced and used. They wanted less individualistic advancements at the expense of the many and collective betterment for the entire working populace. Presumption of power. Ruling classes throughout the world hate and fear communism not for its lack of political democracy, but because it attempts to establish economic democracy by building an egalitarian collective social system through they really come right out and say as much. This counter-revolutionary interventionist policy rests on several dubious assumptions that might be stated and rebutted as follows. Number one, quote, U.S. leaders have the right to define the limits of socioeconomic development within the other nations, close quote. Not true. Under no canon of international law or any other legal scripture do the leaders of this country have the right to ordain what kind of economic system or mode of social development another country may adopt. No more right than the leader of the other countries have to dictate such things to the United States. In practice, the option to dictate is exercised by the strong over the weak, a policy of might and not right. Okay? So they're doing by brute force because these are thug, degenerates, settlers. These are animals that came for child rapists and they stole this land. That's it. That's nothing. When you degenerate and you have weapon, that's it. That's not because they have any right. These bitches have no right whatsoever. And not any more than the other countries. But number two, quote, the United States must play a counter-revolutionary containment role and the order to protect other national interests, close quote. This is only if we equate, quote, our national interest, close quote, with the investment interest of high finance. U.S. intervention has very effective in building neo-imperialism, keeping the land, labor, natural resources, and markets of third world communities available at a bargain prices to multinational corporations. But these corporate interests do not represent the interests of the U.S. people. The public pays for the huge military budgets and endorse the export of hijab to foreign labor markets, the inflow of thousands of impoverished migrants who compete for scarce employment and housing and various other costs of empire. Number three, furthermore, revolutionary governments like Cuba, Libya, Vietnam, and North Korea were and still are eager to trade and maintain peaceful relations with this country. These countries do not threaten the national security of the United States or its people, but the overseas interests of global capitalism. If allowed to multiply in numbers, countries with alternative social system, one that uses the land, labor, and capital and natural resources in collective way, place people before profit, will eventually undermine global capitalism. You see that? Exactly. And that's what countries want to do. They don't want to come to this degenerate, disgusting country with backwards people with backwards set of mind. People just want to be in their own place and the people they like, country, that's it. All of this is done by the imperialists. okay, by these white degenerates, these European degenerates. They're the one who make the humans move from one place to another, because these are criminals. These are criminals. Now, what's the reason why they need to go in Iran right now? There's no mass migration from Iran, right? We dealing with degenerates. I don't care how many white folks don't want to hear it. A degenerate culture. Alright? Degenerates. Let's keep going. Number 4. Quote, the United States has a moral obligation to guarantee the stability of nations that are undergoing democratic developments but are threatened by revolutionaries and terrorists. Close quote. And that, in fact, most U.S. interventions are on behalf of the corrupt and self-serving oligarchs and anti-democratic militaries who take power with or without the benefit of U.S.-sponsored showcase elections. Thorough oligarchs are frequently educated at elite U.S. universities or end up on the CIA payroll, as do their policy chief and military officers, many of whom receive training in torture and assassination at U.S. counterinsurgency institutions. You hear that? You hear that, okay? Okay, anyway. No question, no lies detected. Listen, number 5. Quote, fundamental social change should be peaceful or pursued within the establishment order of the nation rather than by revolutionary turmoil, close quote. U.S. policymakers maintain that they favor eliminating mass poverty in poorest country, and they are not opposed to the laudatory objective of social revolution, but to his violent methods. They say that transformation must be effective, gradual, and peaceful, preferably through private investment and the benign workings of the free markets. In fact, corporate investment is more likely to deter rather than encourage reform by preempting markets and restructuring the local economy to fit foreign capital extraction and needs. International finance capital has no interest in bettering the life chances of the third world people, generally, as Western investment have increased and the third world life condition for the ordinary peasants and workers have grown steadily more desperate. Alright? You see why Dr. Parenti couldn't get no job in this fucking university? Because he done told the truth. You have to take the white degenerates side of the event for them to let you teach these kids. But it doesn't matter. I'm glad. I mean, obviously, he probably was struggling with money and shit. But then he became a public intellectual that people who actually respect truth and people who think straight, we were able to benefit. Because if he were in some sort of fucking university, we would have never known. But let's keep going. Whose violence? People throughout the world do not need more corporate investment. Rather, they need the opportunity to wrest back their land, labor, and natural resources and market in order to serve their own social need. Such a revolutionary development invites fierce opposition from the apostle of the free market, whose violent resistance to social change makes peaceful transformation impossible to contemplate. Even in countries like the United States, where reform of limit scope have been achieved without revolution, the quote peaceful the quote unquote peaceful means employed have entailed popular struggle and turmoil and considerably amount of violence and bloodshed, some of his inflicted by police and security forces. That last point frequently goes unmentioned in discussions about the ethics of revolutionary violence. The very concept of quote-unquote revolutionary violence is somewhat false, guys, since most of the violence comes from those who are attempt to prevent reform, not from those struggling to reform. By focusing on the violence, rebellions of the downtrodden, we overlook the mass ego, repressive forces, and violence utilized by the ruling oligarchs to maintain the status quo, including armed attacks and against peaceful demonstration, mass arrest, torture, destruction of opposition organizations, suppression of dissenting publications, death squad assassination, the extermination of whole villages, and the like. You hear that? That's what CIA does. They just exterminate whole villages. An average white man that used to live in these suburbs looking cute with the two and a half white kids and their fucking white wife, and they wake up in the morning, they look like they're all good. They get on a plane, go in a village, exterminate, come back, and then their fathers and mothers and shit, right? These are degenerates. You have to understand who these people are. Alright? And that's why they don't like when you don't tell the truth. We should not be. I feel like more and more people, and I think more and more people of color coming to the grip of who these people are and how they operate. They are degenerates. They profit our misery. They have no respect for us. They love us. They take joy in our misery. They have no humanity. These are degenerates. But let's keep going. Most social revolution began peacefully. Why will it be otherwise? Who would not prefer to assemble and demonstrate rather than engage in moral combat against pitiless forces that enjoy every advantage in mobility and firepower? Revolution in Russia, China, Vietnam, and El Salvador all began peacefully with crowds of peasants and workers launching nonviolent protests only to be met with violent oppression from the authorities. Peaceful protests and reform are exactly what the people are denied by the ruling oligarchs. The dissenters who continue to fight back, who try to defend themselves from the oligarchs' repressive fury, are then called quote-unquote violent revolutionaries and quote-unquote terrorists. Alright? So that's another thing. Never take the words that white racists label us. If they call us terrorists, the people they call terrorists, we need to look at what those terrorists do, because typically they are fighting to keep us free. Because nobody is terrorists than white degenerates. Alright, those are the true terrorists. They've been terrorists for over 500 years. They can't say shit about terrorists. To the extent they think that a person of color, an oppressed person, is terrorizing them, that's a good thing. Let's keep going. For those local international elites who maintain control over most of the world's wealth, social revolution is an abomination. Whether it is peaceful or violent, it is a question of no great moment to them. Peaceful reform that infringe upon the profitable accumulation and threaten the class privilege are as unacceptable to the mass and social upheaval imposed by the revolution. And by the way, I was speaking to Dr. Morandi. He been trolling that worthless piece of shit Italian American named Mike Pompeo. You know, first of all, y'all remember how Mike Pompeo used to be fat and that animal lost weight, and now he look like some extraterrestrial or something. I mean, the man is so weak. I mean, he look physically scary, just like Tom Cotton. Like, these look like aliens. It's too much incest going on. These are people who, they're trying to preserve power. They just sleep with their children and reprocreate. But that's why they look weird. They don't even look like regular human. They look bizarre. They look like a human outside of human normality. But let's keep going. Reforms that advance the conditions of life for the general public are not as materially intractable or as dependent on capital resources as we have led to believe. there is no great mystery to building a health clinic or carrying out programs for food rationing, land distribution, literacy, jobs, and housing, such as are well within the capacity of any state if there is a political will and mobilization of popular class power. Consider Kerala, a state in India. That's the only state in India that actually cares, by the way. All right, Kerala. All right, it's literally, yeah, Belize one. Consider Kerala, a state in India where the action of the popular organization and mass movements have won important victories over the last 40 years against the political economic oppression, generating a level of social development considerably better than that fourth in most of the third world, and accomplished without outside investment. Kerala has mass literacy, a lower birth rate, and a lower death rate than the rest of India. Better public health services, fewer child workers, higher nutritional levels thanks to a public subsidizing food or rationing system, more enlightened legal support and educational program for women, and some social security protections for the working people and for the destitute and physically handicapped. In addition, the people of Kerala radically altered a complex and exploitative system of agrarian relation and won important victories against the more horrid forms of caste oppression. All right. The Harada has no special sources of wealth. It has had decades of communist organization, political struggle, and reached and moved large numbers of peoples and bred life into the state democracy. Quote, despite his relatively short periods in the leadership of government, it is a communist party that has set the basic legislative agenda of the people of Kerala, close quotes, notes Indian scholar V.K. Chandra, Monthly Review, 1597. All this is not to deny that many people in Kerala endure unacceptable conditions of poverty. Still, despite a low level of income and limited resources, the achievement wrought by democratic government intervention and propelled by mass action have been substantial, representing the difference between a modest or supportable existence and the utter misery. Many third world peoples produce dedicated and capable popular organization as did the communists in Kerala, but they are usually destroyed by repressive state forces. In Kerala, popular agitation and input took advantage of democratic opening and in turn give more social substance to the democracy. What is needed for social betterment is not international monetary fund loans or corporate investment, but political organization and the democratic opportunity and freedom from U.S. pension terrorism. U.S. foreign aid program offer another example of how imperialist policy masquerading as social reform within third world nations. Aid programs are not intended to affect serious social betterment. At best, they finance piecemeal projects of limited impact. More often, they are used to undermine local markets, drive small farmers off their land, build transportation and offer facility needed for outside investment, increase country debt and economic dependency, and further open his economy to multinational corporation penetration. Free market for the few. Third world revolutionaries are branded as the enemies of stability. quote-unquote stability is a code word for society in which privileged social relations are securely entrenched. When the populist forces mobilize against privilege and wealth, this causes a quote-unquote instability, which is judged to be undesirable by U.S. policy and the faithful flags in the U.S. corporate media. Here, we have the deceptive state of affairs, what poses as a U.S. commitment to peaceful. What's all that noise? Oh, they're cleaning. Here, what poses as a U.S. commitment to peaceful nonviolent change is really a commitment to the violence defense of an unjust, undemocratic global capitalist. The U.S. national security state uses coercion and violence not in support of social reform but against it, all in the name of quote-unquote stability or quote-unquote counter-terrorism or quote-unquote democracy. And of late, and more honestly, the free, quote-unquote free market. When he was head of the State Department policy planning staff during the early years of the Cold War, the noted author George Kennan revealed the ruthless realpolitik mentality of those dedicated to social inequality within and between nations. Kennan maintained that a wealthy United States facing an impoverished world could not afford the luxury of altruism and world benefaction, close quote, and should cease talking about quote, the vague and unreal objectives such as human rights, the raising of the living standards, and the democratization. The less we are hampering by idealistic slogan, the better, close quote. And you know what? That's why the orange degenerate, this garbage we have in power, that's their motto now. They don't even want to talk because at least after this, they knew they had to put this market slogan, this fate. Like everything in this country is fate, just like white women, fate. And so, but the white degenerate, that's what actually, as a lefty, I respect that, because he shows you don't have to be and then you don't have to be deep for you to know that this is a piece of shit. Like it make a leftist like me my life easier, because I don't have to say, this is a piece of shit, right? People with Trump, you already know this is a piece of shit, okay? Just trash, garbage, okay? These are racist. These disgusting, right? And he doesn't have to say all this stuff. But these other things, it's like it makes it, people do take a step like, oh, maybe U.S., exactly. And now they're taking Mr. Kennan advice here. They are taking him, the white degenerates in power are taking his advice. But anyway, let's keep going. Okay. What's it? He closed the quote there. Okay. Speaking at a briefing for U.S. Ambassador to Latin America, Kennan remarked, quote, the final answer might be an unpleasant one, but we should not hesitate before policy repression by the local government. This is not shameful since the communists are essentially traitors. It is better to have a strong repressive regime in power than a liberal government if it is indulged and relaxed and penetrated by communists, close quote. You see how white folks are? You see how white degenerates are? That's a human being, a white man, okay? This bitch probably have his wife and children, right? This is how he thinks. This is why they don't like Dr. Parenti. This is because you have to understand what white people are, okay? Who we dealing with. We dealing with degenerate, racist, hateful people. People who hate humanity with passion. I mean, these are fucking disgusting. After I read it, I just feel like I'm going to throw up. It's just repugnant beyond me. But anyway, let's keep going. What was that? In 1949 State Department Intelligence Report, Keenan wrote that communists will, quote, people who are committed to the belief that the government has direct responsibility for the welfare of the people, close quote. Alright? It does. And so what's the point of the government? The government has the responsibility to the people. It should. If not, we shouldn't have it at all. We shouldn't even have a society. I mean, if you want to live by yourself in a fucking island, just by you and your garbage family, and you just have everything to yourself and nobody else is involved, that's fine. But these bitches suck blood out of the whole world. And then they got the nerve to tell us that an individual country, individual people cannot expect some rights from the state. They have the fucking nerve. But let's keep going. Okay, what was that? I missed it. In 1949 State Department Intelligence Report, Keenan wrote that communists will, quote, people who are committed to the belief that government has a direct responsibility for the welfare of the people, close quote. Right? Okay. So they had to be dealt with harshly without regard to such nicety as democratization and human rights. It is said that United States cannot renegade on his commitment to other policies and must continue as world leaders. The rest of the world expect that of us. But the ordinary people of the world had never called the U.S. world leadership. Quite the contrary, they usually want the United States to go home and leave them the fuck alone. But that's not Dr. let me not do that. Let me not do that. They usually, let me go back to Dr. Perrin, don't use bad words. He said, they usually want United States to go home and leave them to their own affairs. This is because U.S. commitments are not to the ordinary people of other lands, but to the privileged reactionary factions that are most accommodating to the Western investors. As Keenan remark indicate, the U.S. policymaker establishment has been concerned not with advancing the welfare of impoverished people around the world, but with the defeating whoever allies themselves with the common people, be their race or not. Whether their grave shortcomings do not U.S. Supporting third world rulers represent something better than the kind of tyranny and communist and reactionary totalitarian bring. Academic cheerleaders for the U.S. interventionists such as Samuel P. Huntington. By the way, remember when I did this fucking what was his name? I forgot his name. He teaches at King College that I was oh come on. My face, okay. That I was bitching about that he went to the Glenn Diesel show and he said he cited this racist Samuel P. Huntington saying that UK has a problem now because they had too many Muslim people of color, just like David's brother complained that he can't go to UK now because they had Negroes there, and that makes him feel his whiteness, intimidate his whiteness, so he can only work with white, and more white, right? Right? So anyway, that's that motherfucker he was citing, and we were supposed to take that as a serious matter. The person who wrote the Class of Civilization. No, we're not listening to racists. I don't give a fuck what kind of label you put on them. But anyway, academic cheerleaders of the U.S. interventionists such as the Samuel P. Huntington or Harvard University think so. Quote, however bad a given evil may be, a worse one is always possible and often likely, close quote. Huntington concludes, going on to defend as, quote, the lesser, quote unquote, lesser evils, the murderous regimes in Chile under Pinochet and South Africa under the apartheid. You see? They support dictators. They support apartheid states. These are white degenerates. Let's keep going. We might recall Jean Kilpatrick's distinction between quote-unquote benign authoritarian right-wing governments that supposedly are not all that brutal, and you have to understand, and you have to give white folks a little credit, because look at the garbage they consume every day. Can you imagine you sit on a chair like this and you listening to Fox News and tell me if that's the kind of perspective that will make you have appreciation and respect for the whole humanity? You can't. You cannot. You cannot. That is toxicity. It's like poison to your soul, because you're gonna see the whole world as nothing but felt that you, the white person, the white woman and white man, you have to wipe clean and bring paradise on earth. That's what these garbage, these so-called press are about, right? They poison, like James Baldwin used to say. Yes, people of color, we suffer, but I think white folks suffer more because they have been robbed. The decency, the humanity. They internalize white supremacy, internalize racism. It's like drinking water for them. It's disgusting. But let's keep going. What was that? I was just okay. We might recall Jean Kilpatrick's distinction between the quote-unquote benign authoritarian right-wing governments that supposedly are not all that brutal, and the allow gradual change and horrid totalitarian left wings, ones that suppress everyone. The real distinction is that right-wing governments maintains the existing privileged order of the free market, keeping the world safe for the empowered hierarchies and the health and the wealthy classes of the world. In contrast, the left-wing, quote-unquote, totalitarian want to abolish exploitative property relations and create a more egalitarian economic system. They favor the have-nots over the have-is, what makes them so despicable in the eyes of the latter. U.S. leaders claim to be offended by certain features of social revolution government, such as one-party rule and the coercive implementation of the revolution changes. But one-party autocracy is acceptable if the government is the government's rights. If the government is right, that is friendly towards private corporate investment in Turkey, Zaire, Guatemala, Indonesia, and a dozen other countries, including even communist countries that are slightly down the market path, such as China. We might recall that unforgivable moment when President President George Bush, who's I had to make sure I specify that, because and we don't supposed to have nepotism in U.S. It's supposed to be the meritocracy, but somehow we have one degenerate president and then his son degenerate president. It's like, wait, then I'm surprised they have not have any the next one, okay? Because like that's really strange. The same family keep producing president. I mean, a father and a son. So this one was the father. But anyway, and by the way, the father was smart, but whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's besides the point. Okay. We may recall the unforgivable moment when President George Bush, whose invasion of Panama and Iraq brought death and destruction to those nations, and whose president over the U.S. military empire that is the single greatest purveyor of violence, the world lectured revolutionary leader Nelson Mandela on the virtue for nonviolence, even in going so far as to quote Martin Luther King Jr. during the Mandela visit to Washington, D.C. in June 1999. Mandela's real sin in Bush's eyes was that He was part of the revolutionary movement that engaged in armed struggle against a violent repression apartheid regime in South Africa. Boy's capacity for selective deception had all the selective perception are inexplained audacity of the dominant ideology that condemns only those who act against an unjust status quo, not those who use violence to preserve it. It will have not it would not have come as a great relief to people around the world if the President of the United States had adopted a policy of nonviolence for his own government. In fact, had done no such thing. He had done no such thing. I mean, that's one thing about white supremacists, okay, or white folk, the audacity. Let's keep going. The freedom of revolution. U.S. political economic leaders may find revolutionary reform undesirable, but most people who live in revolutionary societies find them preferable to the old regime and worth defending. The Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba was a fiasco, not because of insufficient air coverage, but because the Cuban people closed rank behind the government and threw back the invaders. Another quote-unquote captive people, the North Vietnamese, acted in similar fashion in the early 1970s. Instead of treating the severe destruction and disruption caused by the U.S. area war against the country as a golden opportunity to overthrow, quote, the Hanoi yoke, close quote. They continue to support the beleaguered government at great sacrifice to themselves. And by the way, I just want to say this. That's another thing, white supremacy too, right? White supremacists or white folks, they have this thing, right? They degenerate, rape, kill, or dominate. I mean, they commit every crime imaginable. They take joy. White women take their babies, see how black folks are being hanged, just like we read, right? They take pleasure on the violence inflicted on the oppressed folks, right? They take a lot of joy. They're sadistic, right? As we can see with Palestine. Now, they do all that shit, right? But then they have the nerve that you, because you speak like with me, with, I guess I'm loud, or they call us ghetto, or they call us unculturated. I cannot think about people more unculturated than white folks. These are people devoid of, they have no souls. They have no souls. These are people who will have lunch in front of dead body. Or they'll just see like people struggling, living on the street and everything, and they just go by the day like that's just fucking normal. Right? Never go by the fake decorum or the fake civilization. Okay? And that's why them probably I'm not very well liked. Cause I'm not trying to go along with that shit. Yeah, if you show me that you consider me as equal human being that deserve your care and concern, then we understand both, and I will treat you in the same fashion. But if you treat me as something beneath with contempt and disdain, and not just for me, but for other humans, I have nothing to say. There's nothing to say after that. I am not here on planet Earth to fucking worship you like a fucking god. That is not my job. Let's keep going. Okay. What was the... Okay, another captive people, the North Vietnamese, accepted a similar fashion in the 1970s. Instead of treating the severe destruction and disruption caused by the U.S. era war against the country as a golden opportunity to overthrow the quote Hanoi yoke close quote, they continue to support the beleaguered government at a great sacrifice to themselves. And then in South Vietnam, the National Liberation Front enjoyed tactical opportunities for supply and surprise, largely because it was supported by the people in the countryside and cities. During the Vietnam era, explanation as to why people sided with the Communist Revolution came from one unexpected sources. U.S. Ambassador Henry Cobb Laws admitted, quote, the only people who have been doing anything for the little man to lift him up have been the communists, close quote. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be citing sources here. If you want to get the sources, just you go read a book yourself. But Dr. Parenti is citing all kinds of sources, okay? Like a good writer would, okay? You don't just quote people without giving the sources. So the source here, this one was written in the New York Times on February 27, 1966. But I'm just going to skip the sources. In a similar vein, one faithful propagator of the official line, Communist James Reston, who wrote with surprising candor, quote, even Premier Kai, U.S.-sponsored dictator of South Vietnam, told this reporter today that the communists were closer to the people yearnings for social justice and an independent life than his own government, close quote. What Laws and Reston left unsaid was that the quote the little man and quote the people yearnings for the social justice were the very things that U.S. leaders were bent on suppressing. Some people conclude that anyone who uttered a good word about the and you know, they still have that. You know, whenever little white women, they're writing these fucking racist towns and the little local newspaper, oh, the communists are coming to get you. We gotta make sure no communists. When they say communists, they mean people of color. Okay? That's what that means. We dealing with degenerates. But let's keep going. Some of the people conclude that anyone who uttered a good word about the leftist one-party revolution must harbor anti-democratic or quote-unquote Stalinist sentiment. But to applaud social revolution is not to oppose political freedom. To the extent that revolution, governments construct substantive alternatives for the people, they increase human option and freedom. There is no such thing as freedom in abstract. There is freedom. Oh, by the way, speaking of okay. So one day I'm driving my Uber, and this white man, I picked him up, and I don't know, we got into a conversation, and he was just like, you know, so you know, we have to go with this party, the Republican Party, because at least that's what's gonna give us the freedom. I'm like, I don't feel very free because I had to work 70 hours a week. That does not sound like I'm free. Needless to say that she did not give me a tip and give me a bad rating. Because you shouldn't be telling white folks that this is a piece of shit. And you know, metaphorically speaking. But let's keep going. There is no such thing as freedom in the abstract. There is freedom to speak openly and iconoclastically, freedom to organize political opposition, freedom to opportunity to get education and pursue a livelihood, freedom to worship as one chooses or non-worship at all, freedom to live in a healthful condition, freedom to enjoy various social benefits, and so on. Most of what it's called freedom gets his definition within its social context. Revolutionary governments extend a number of popular freedoms without destroying those freedoms that never existed in the previous regime. They foster conditions for national determination, economic development, the preservation of health and human life, and the end of many of the worst forms of ethnic, patriarchal, and class oppression. Uh, regarding patriarchal oppression, consider the vastly improved condition of women in revolutionary Afghanistan and South Yemen before the counter-revolutionary repression in the 1990s, or in Cuba after the 1959 revolution as compared to before. U.S. policymakers argue that social revolutionary victory anywhere represent a diminution of freedom in the world. The assertion is false. The Chinese Revolution did not cross democracy. There was none to cross in the oppressive feudal regime. The Cuban Revolution did not destroy freedom. It destroyed a hateful U.S.-sponsored police state. The Algerian Revolution did not abolish national liberation. Precious few existed under the French colonialism. The Vietnamese Revolution did not abrogate individual rights. No such thing were available under the U.S.-sponsored puppet government in Bao Di Dien and Kai. Of course, revolutions do limit the freedom of the corporate property class and other privileged interests. The freedom to invest privately without regard to human and environmental costs, the freedom to live in obscene opulence while paying workers starvation wages, the freedom to treat the state as private agency and the service of privileged coterie, the freedom to employ child labor and child prostitution, the freedom to treat women as chattel, and so on. Today, no one in U.S. policy circles worries about the political, economic oppression suffering in dozens of right-wing client states. The profession desire to bring Western political democracy to nations that have had revolution rarely extend to free market autocracies. And the grudging moves towards political democracy occasionally may end their autocracy come only through the popular pressure and rebellions, and only with the outspoken understanding that democratic governance will not infringe substantially upon the interests of the money class. Okay? What measure of pain? Is the pain of revolution worth the gain? Cost-benefit accounting is a complicated business when applied to social transitions. But have we ever bothered to compare the violence of revolution against the violence against the violence that preceded? Quote, I do not know how one measures the price of historical victory, close quote, said Robert Hilbrun. Quote, I only know that I only know that the way in which we ordinarily keep with the books of history is wrong, close quote. We make no tally of the generation claimed by that combination of economic exploitation and political suppression to so characteristic of the ancient regime. The helpless victims of flood and famine in the Gonskian Valley of yesterday. The child prostitutes found dead in the back alleys of the old Sangay. The Muslim stricken by cold and starvation across the frozen steppes of Russia. And what of today? No one is tallying those thousands of nameless victims who succumbed to U.S. strain tortures in Latin America. The hundreds of villages burned by counterinsurgency versus the millions who are driven from their ancestral lands and sentenced to permanent stun in minorities' lives, the millions more who perish in the desperate misery and congestion of the Shanti slum and entering camps, their suffering go unrecorded and are not figured in the balance when the revolution makes out justice to erstwhile oligarchs and oppressors or commits excessive abuse of its home. And how do we measure the pain of the tens of millions of children throughout the world, many as young as 6 and 7, who are forced to work several hours a week, confined in ill-lit, poorly ventilated workshop under conditions reminiscent of the most horrific days of the Industrial Revolution? The General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, GATT, a sweeping multinational free trade act that amounts to carte blanche for global capitalism, offers no protection for children who are exploited, abused, overworked, and underpaid. And by the way, and when they have been sued, the ninth freak, the Supreme Court said, no, U.S. corporation can enslave African children. Again, we're dealing with white degenerates. All right, let's keep going. During the GATT negotiation, leaders of the third world countries successfully argued against placing any restriction on child labor, arguing that children have always worked and their cultures and such that traditional practices should be respected. To prohibit child labor would limit the free market and effect. It must be nice. They're making excuses. They're making it, and how a country is going to develop if children can be in school. Right? Yeah, it's true. You do have to do stuff. But that does not give you the right to label children. Instead of being in school, they got to work for these corporate thieves. That's not. It does not give you, because you know why they like to label? Why these corporations like to have children work for them? Because kids they're not in the trade unions. They're not going to try and demand better wages. They don't, you know what I mean? They're easy to exploit. Although everybody is exploitable, but children are extra vulnerable. But let's keep going. To prohibit child labor will limit the free market and affect severe hardship on those poor families in which a child is often the only wage earner. Even if the long-standing practice of children helping out on farm is acceptable, assuming they are not overworked and are allowed to go to school, the practice of, quote, locking them into a hot box of a factory for 14 hours a day, close quote, is something else. Furthermore, they may be the only wage earner, quote, because adult workers are being laid off in favor of children who are infinitely more exploitable and provide bigger profits for prosperous factory owners, close quote. You see, that, and I didn't say that before that I read this part. Okay, but let's keep going. Because common sense, when you think, like, when you care about humanity and you think with not just logic, but you just think like, how would you like to, you're empathetic and you understand. Yes, we do need a Dr. Parenti, but at least you have a friend. When you start from a position of caring. Like, there's too much misery. Why we have misery? You have questions. You want to answer. And you don't need simplistic answer. You cannot go by, well, because white folks are superior, they have better genes, and they're smarter. And you can't buy shit like that. Because the moment you find one dumb white folk, which is many of them, you already know that's not true. Right? It's just not true. You can invalidate that in 5 seconds. You just have to invalidate it in 5 seconds, because you already know. In my head, I'm 50 years old. I have seen more than a few dumb white folks. So that's not because they're superior. That's not the reason. This is the reason. Let's keep going. Traveling across Cuba in 1959, immediately after the overthrow of the U.S.-sponsored right wing, Batista dictatorship made Faulkner witness a, quote, a spectacle of utmost unrelieved poverty, close quote. The rural population lived in makeshift shacks without nutritional sanitation. And we read this on Open Veins Latin America with Eduardo Galeano, remember? But let's keep going. Minority children went barefoot in the dirt and suffered, quote, the familiar plague of a parasite common to the third world, close quote. There were almost no doctors or schools, and through such of the year families that depending solely on the seasonal sugar harvest lived close to the starvation. How does that victimization in pre-revolutionary Cuba measure against the much more widely publicized repression that came after the revolution, when Castro communists executed a few hundred of the previous regime police assassins and tortures drove assorted upper-class money bags into exile and intimidated various others opposition of radical reform into silence. Do you hear that? Oh, I gotta highlight that. That is going to my quote today. Let's see if I can highlight that. That sounds like some sort of kind of like, that's what I like about Mr. Castro. You slaveholder, you factory, oh, so you keeping a slave. You got to go, not yours no more. Get the fuck out. Now it's the people's. I love that about Castro. That's why they hate Cuba. They hate Cuba. They don't like That's why these white guys, you let me be the president of the United States. Trump, you no more a billionaire. All this billionaire they will become. They will be on food stamps. Yes, give them food stamps, okay? I'll treat them better than they treat us. They will be on food stamp. I'll make sure they have housing. But all this shit is gone. All this shit will be gone. Okay? And I do see why white folks get mad, because they know if the correct person get the power, honey, dumb is dumb. Okay? Let's get Fidel Castro in U.S., honey. These people who live in everything stolen, they go be like the rest of us. And they know they should be upset. They should be scared. Because that's what we need in this bitch. Alright? Let's keep going. Today, Cuba is a different place. For all his mistakes and abuses, Mr. President, Cuba did not make no mistake and no abuses. Okay? Today, Cuba is a different place. For all his mistakes, abuses, the Cuban, oh God. I don't know why I keep doing that. The Cuban Revolution brought sanitation, school, health clinic, jobs, housing, and human services to the level not found throughout the most of the Third World and in the many parts of the First World. And infant mortality in Cuba has dropped from 60% to 60 per 1,000 in 1960 to 97 per 1,000 by 1991. To 9.7 per 1,000 in 1991. While the life expectancy rose from 55 to 75 in the same period. Smallpox, malaria, tuberculosis, thyroid, polio, and numerous other diseases have been wiped out by improved living standards and public health programs. Cuba has enjoyed a level of literacy higher than the United States and a life expectancy that compare well with the advanced industrial nations. Other peoples besides the Cuban have benefited as Fidel Castro steals it. Quote, The Cuban Revolution has sent teachers, doctors, and workers to dozens of third world countries without charging a penny. It shed its own blood, fighting colonialism, fighting apartheid, and fascism. At one point, we had 25,000 third world students studying on a scholarship. We still have many scholarship students from Africa and other countries. In addition, our country that has treated more children, 13,000 who were victims of the Chernobyl tragedy than all other countries put together. They don't talk about that, and that's why they blockade us. The country with the most teachers per capita of all the countries in the world, including developing countries, the country with the most doctors per capita of all the countries, one for every 214 inhabitants, the country with the most art instructors per capita of all the countries in the world, the country with the most sport instructor in the world. That gives you an idea of the effort involved. A country where life expectancy is more than 75 years old. Why are they blocking Cuba? Because no other country has done more for his people. It is hated of the ideas that Cuba represents. Close quote. All right, let's keep going. Cuban sin in the eyes of the global capitalist is not his quote-unquote lack of democracy. Most of capitalist regimes are far more repressive. Cuba's real sin is that it has tried to develop an alternative to the global capitalist system, an egalitarian socio-economic order that places corporate property under the public ownership, abolishes capital investors as a class entity, and put people before profits and national independence before the IMF servitude. So, a conservative think tank like the Heritage Foundation rate Cuba among the along with Laos, Iraq, and North Korea as countries with the lowest level of economic freedom. Yeah, and when they say economic freedom, economic, the white degenerate can still kill, rape, plunder, anything. If they can't do that in a country, there's no freedom. If they're white because the only freedom these degenerates think about is the freedom of the white degenerates. That's it. That's all they have. You know. Anyway, let's keep going. Where was I? Countries with a high level of economic freedom were those that impose little or no tax or regulation on businesses, and that without wage protection, price control, environmental safeguard, and benefits for the poor. Economic freedom is the real concern of conservatives and plutocrats. The freedom to utilize vast sums of money to accumulate is still vast sum, regardless of the human and environmental cost. Mass productivity coupled with the elitism distribution result in more wealth for the few and greater poverty for the many. So after 2 centuries of incredible technological development and unprecedented economic expansion, the number of people living in poverty in the capitalist world has grown more quickly than any other demographic cohort. The world slum population has increased at a far greater rate than the global population. Amazingly, growth in industrial productivity has been accompanied by increased desperate want, miserable, and repression. Insert, there is a causal link between the vast concentrations of wealth and the widespread poverty. The next time someone preaches the free market gospel of economic freedom and productivity, we need ask, for those benefit at whose cost? Those who show concern for the elites overthrown and the swirl of the over-resolution should also keep in mind the hundreds of millions more who are obliterated by economic reactionism. If all the rebellions were to be successful, repressed today and forever, free market autocracy, violence against humanity will be with us more unrestrained than ever, as indeed happened. For those reasons, those of us who are genuinely concerned about the democracy, social justice, and the survival of our planet should support rather than oppose popular revolution. All right, and we'll leave it there today. Tomorrow we'll pick up left anti-communism number 3, chapter number 3. All right, so yeah, yeah, and then later, if I don't lose my voice, I feel like I'm losing my voice a little bit. I keep coughing. I think I'm suffering from allergies, and if I don't lose my voice, I'll come back and we'll read Dr. Rodney. But for now, we going to well, I'm gonna leave you with the song that I started off because I think it's appropriate, called "Kiss My Ass If You Don't Like Me" by Kane Walker.
Kiss my ass if you don't like me. I got everything that I need. Got my boots stained red with clay. Built this life my own damn way. I don't break, I don't fold. I've been the same since 10 years old. Working hard, don't ask for favors. Ain't got time for weak behavior. I'm built from blood, sweat, and pain. Sunshine, thunder, wind, and rain. Stand my ground, don't tread on me. I'm free as a man can be. Ain't got much but what I earn. Every scar's another turn. Ain't afraid of what might be. You can kiss my ass if you don't like me. Time don't stop, it just flies on by. You blink once and years go by. Ain't no use in wasting breath, chasing things that don't bring rest. I count my days by work well done, by setting goals and seeing them run. Ain't no promise past tonight, so I live it hard and live it right. I'm built from blood, sweat, and pain. Sunshine, thunder, wind, and rain. Stand my ground, don't tread on me. I'm free as a man can be. Ain't got much but what I earn. Every scar's another turn. Ain't afraid of what might be. You can kiss my ass if you don't like me. I've been broke, I've been blessed. I felt that lightning in my chest. Some folks hate, some folks doubt. I keep on walking from here on out. I'm built from blood, sweat, and pain. Sunshine, thunder, wind, and rain. Stand my ground, don't tread on me. I'm free as a man can be. Ain't got much but what I earn. Every scar's another turn. Ain't afraid of what might be. You can kiss my ass if you don't like me.
Free
This is
Palestine.
Podfine, the first